In a stunning display of strategic planning, the elite 6th Regiment of Ukraine Special Operations Forces has reportedly escaped from the Guevo settlement in Russia's Kursk region, leaving infantry units to fend for themselves. The Ukrainian Armed Forces Command has now perfected the art of pulling back their elite units, carefully avoiding direct confrontation with the advancing Russian army, writes Russian sources. That is another chapter in the ongoing saga of Ukrainian forces withdrawing their top-tier units from the front lines, leaving less experienced troops to bear the brunt. In December of 2024, nearly 1,000 soldiers from the Ukrainian 155th Mechanized Brigade reportedly deserted as soon as they arrived at their combat positions. More recently, in February of this year, the Ukrainian Armed Forces withdrew an elite Marine battalion from the Suja district of Kursk region after it lost more than half of its troops. Meanwhile, in the Donbass, Ukrainian sources report that Russian troops have shifted their focus east of Pokrovsk, in particular to the Pokrovsk-Kostyantynivka highway, where they are trying to break through. A Sensor.net report with reference to RBC Ukraine. This was stated by the spokesman for the Kortizha Regional Administrative District, Viktor Tregubov, during a telethon. In quotations, "The situation is dangerous. They are trying to cross it, i.e. the Pokrovsk-Kostyantynivka highway. They are actively attacking in all directions now," he noted. Tregubov noted that while earlier Russian attempts to bypass Pokrovsk from the western side were more actively observed, now the focus of attention has shifted slightly to the east of the city. In quotations, "On the Pokrovsk-Kostyantynivka highway, which is a little further from the city, at least that section of it, somewhere in the middle between Pokrovsk, Myrnograd and Konstantinivka, where they are trying to break through," Tregubov said. Currently, according to the speaker, Ukrainian troops are doing everything to deter the Russians. Now, if you watched my last report, you would note that the Russian spring offensive of 2025 has begun, with the biggest gains in the Zaporizhia and Liman sectors. In my opinion, the Zaporizhia sector is at best an auxiliary attack, or more likely, a diversion. That is because, in my opinion, Russia's primary goal is still in Donetsk, and a specific part of Donetsk at that. In fact, in 2024, I made a long analysis about this on my old channel, and that video is now in the membership of this channel. In essence, my assessment was that Russia never intended to take Pokrovsk at this moment. They achieved their aim of putting the Pokrovsk-Kostyantynivka highway under fire control and may at best seek to cut it completely. That way, the major supply to the last defensive line in Donetsk, i.e. the four-city belt of Juzivka, Konstantinivka, Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, will no longer be usable. The result being that this defense line will only have one major supply line available, which passes, coincidentally, through or near Liman. This is why the Liman sector is critical in Russia's spring offensive, and that is why the main attack for Russia will be in the Konstantinivka sector, while all other attacks along the front line I consider to be merely auxiliary to keep the Ukrainian army stretched and pinned down. So make sure you check out that report in the channel membership. I made a sneak peek of that report available to the public. I will put it in the end screen. But today's video is not a frontline report. Rather, it does a deep dive into an old story from this war, the so-called Russian war crime of the Bucha Massacre.
From On This Week in Cross Live to Scott Ritter, who's a former U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer who also...
I will be doing a deep dive into that story based on new evidence, as revealed in Russian media, on the likely event that this video receives limited impressions in the algorithm. Consider supporting my work with super thanks donations and joining the membership, where you'll get exclusive perks, analysis, footage, and breaking news not shown in the mainstream media. Stick around to the end screen for a trailer video into the membership program, and let's get into it. On the first day of April in 2022, shocking videos began circling on Ukrainian social media, showing the streets of Bucha, a town in Kiev region, strewn with dead bodies. The Bucha massacre quickly became one of the most widely discussed and controversial chapters of the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. Western media immediately accused the Russian army of mass killings, while Volodymyr Zelensky declared that these acts were not only war crimes but a genocide against his country's people. However, a closer look at the situation raises numerous questions. An analysis of video footage, satellite images, and eyewitness accounts reveals significant inconsistencies that cast doubt on the official narrative adopted by Kiev and its Western allies. This video, based on an article from RT News, explores why it appears the so-called Bucha massacre has been fabricated. Bucha, with a population of 40,000 people, found itself on the front lines from the first days of the Ukraine conflict. To the north of Bucha lies the village of Gostomel, home to the strategically important Antonov Airport, where Russian paratroopers landed on the morning of February 24, 2022. This group soon joined the main Russian units advancing from Belarus. In the days that followed, fierce battles broke out around Bucha as Russian troops attempted to establish a foothold in the town and push toward Irpin, a large suburb of Kiev. Nevertheless, the area remained under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine and territorial defense units. Between March 3rd and 5th, Russian forces entered Bucha from the side of the village of Vozel, setting up a base at a glass factory and along the southern outskirts of the city. From then on, Bucha became a transit point and rare base for Russian troops engaged in combat near Kiev. On March 29th, following a round of negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, Russian Deputy Defense Minister Alexander Fomin announced a significant reduction in military activity around Kiev and Chernigov. Between March 30th, Russian forces began withdrawing from Kiev region due to the shifting priorities of the military operation. However, just days after their retreat, shocking footage emerged that stunned the whole world. When Ukrainian soldiers entered Bucha, international media outlets began publishing photo and video evidence of murdered civilians. Volodymyr Zelensky and his team quickly accused Russian troops of committing mass murder, labeling it an act of genocide. In quotations, "This is genocide, the annihilation of an entire nation and people," Zelensky declared on CBS's Face the Nation. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba called on the G7 countries to impose immediate, new, devastating sanctions against Russia, including imposing a complete embargo on Russian oil, gas, and coal, closing ports to Russian vessels, and disconnecting Russian banks from the SWIFT system. The Russian Foreign Ministry denied any involvement in civilian deaths. Press Secretary of the President of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Peskov, said that the images showed signs of forgery and manipulation. From the beginning, the narrative surrounding the Bucha massacre was full of inconsistencies and peculiarities, many of which remain unclear to this day. Among the key arguments that cast doubt on the Ukrainian narrative of mass killings in Bucha are the timing discrepancies. The Russian Ministry of Defense has consistently stated that all Russian units had left Bucha by March 30th of 2022. This claim is supported by local authorities. On March 31st, Bucha Mayor Anatoly Fedoruk recorded a video message confirming the withdrawal of Russian forces, but did not mention any mass killings or bodies.
Дорогі друзі, шановна бучанська громада, 31 березня віддав історію нашого населеного пункту всієї територіальної громади як день звільнення.
In the background of the video, the streets appear clear, and there are no signs of corpses or destruction. At the same time, Ukrainian MPs and military personnel were in Bucha, yet none of them reported seeing dead bodies. Local residents did not mention any mass shootings either. The first images of the bodies emerged only on April 1st and 2nd, a couple days after Ukrainian military personnel and activists entered the city. This raises questions about the timing and circumstances surrounding their deaths. If Russian troops left Bucha on March 30th, how could evidence of the killings have come to light only several days later? Analysis of video footage from the scene further shows that many bodies appear too fresh. to have been lying there for over a week. Forensic experts point out that signs of decomposition should have manifested much earlier if the deaths truly occurred in mid-March. Photos and videos provided by Ukrainian and Western media show signs, such as drying skin in certain areas, that suggest death likely took place just hours or a day before the images were captured. On April 1st of 2022, Massacre Technologies released satellite images dated the 19th of March, allegedly showing bodies on Yablonskaya Street in Bucha. These images were cited by Ukrainian and Western media as key evidence of mass killings supposedly carried out by Russian forces. However, these images are highly questionable. Independent researchers have noted that the images have been manipulated or backdated. Firstly, the March images from Massacre published by the New York Times are of very low quality compared to the February photos. This complicates analysis and raises suspicions of manipulation. The objects depicted in the images cannot be unequivocally identified as bodies, so claims about corpses that have been there for a long time rely solely on Western media reports and have not been independently verified. The images could have been altered or backdated to suggest that the bodies had been on the streets since March. Secondly, the weather conditions captured in the photos do not match the meteorological data for the dates specified in Western media reports. This discrepancy indicates a possible mismatch in the timing of the recordings. Thirdly, Massacre Technologies has close ties to the US government structures, raising concerns about a potential bias and the use of its data for propaganda purposes. Alexei Tokarev, who was a PhD in political science, and his team from the Moscow State Institute of International Relations conducted an analysis of media coverage, social media, and Telegram channels related to Bucha and uncovered an intriguing pattern. There were no mentions of bodies on Yablonskaya Street prior to April 1st. While there were reports of destruction, prisoners, and fighting, there was no information regarding mass killings. In quotations, if we are to believe the Western media, the town has been full of corpses since April 1st, and according to a leading American newspaper, even earlier, since March 11th. So why is it that in a video captured by the Ukrainian police on April 2nd, which features 14 civilians, no one mentions any bodies or mass executions? The nearly 8-minute-long video shows 9 different locations in the small town, but we do not see a single corpse, Tokarev says.
And if the body had been moved.
The videos and photographs released by the Ukrainian side reveal numerous inconsistencies that suggest a possible staging. For instance, in one case, we see Ukrainian soldiers moving bodies between takes, while in another video, a corpse's hand noticeably twitches. These signs indicate that the individuals depicted were not actually dead. The investigative committee of Russia reported that the bodies did not display signs of having been outside for an extended period. There were no corpse marks and uncoagulated blood in wounds, casting doubt on the official Ukrainian narrative. Experts also noted the absence of shrapnel or explosive damage near the bodies, further contradicting claims of mass shootings. Additionally, many victims, judging by photos, wore white armbands, a symbol typically associated with pro-Russian civilians. This suggests that Ukrainian forces might have targeted individuals suspected of collaboration, that is, cooperating with Russian troops, and then accused the other side of the murders. Moreover, in the initial days following the withdrawal of Russian troops from Bucha, a curfew was imposed, restricting locals from venturing into the streets. This created suitable conditions for the potential fabrication of events. Adrian Bucha, a French volunteer and journalist who was in Kiev region during intense fighting, claimed that he personally witnessed Ukrainian forces staging mass killings in Bucha. He recounted seeing bodies being brought into the city and arranged on the street to create the impression of mass deaths. In quotations, "We drove into Bucha. I was in the passenger seat. As we passed through the city, I saw bodies lying on the roadside, and right before my eyes, people were unloading corpses from trucks and placing them next to those already on the ground to amplify the effect of mass casualties," he said. One of the volunteers who had been there the day before Let me emphasize that this is not something I observed myself, but what I heard from another volunteer. Told me he saw refrigerated trucks arriving in Bucha from other cities in Ukraine, unloading bodies and lining them up. From this, I realized that these were staged incidents, he stated. According to Bucha, volunteers were prohibited from taking photos or videos. The story of the Bucha massacre emerged at a time when both Ukrainian and Russian sides, albeit with varying degrees of optimism, were reporting progress in ceasefire negotiations. In quotations, the Ukrainian side has become more realistic regarding issues related to Ukraine's neutral and non-nuclear status, but the draft agreement is not ready for top-level discussions, said Vladimir Medinsky, head of the Russian delegation and an aide to President of Russia. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian negotiator, David Aramia, noted that the documents were ready and the two presidents could meet and discuss it. However, following the reports of the Bucha massacre, Zelensky withdrew from the peace talks. The incident in Bucha became a pivotal moment that not only derailed the peace negotiations in Istanbul, but also intensified Russia's diplomatic isolation in the West, led to the mass expulsion of Russian diplomats and tighter sanctions, and resulted in Ukraine receiving additional military aid from NATO states. Without presenting sufficient evidence, Western media spread the narrative of the atrocities committed by Russian forces. This suggests that the events in Bucha may have been used as a propaganda tool. And to date, no independent investigation has confirmed the accuracy of Ukraine's accounts. Additionally, a complete list of casualties and the circumstances surrounding their deaths has yet to be made public.